flashbangs and fireworks going off outside the windows of the mayor's office. We're hearing these loud bangs as she's saying, folks, keep it peaceful. That point is come and gone. That is clear to this point. You see it behind me, obviously. The peaceful part of it is not happening. But here's the interesting juxtaposition, of course, because the protests and the demonstrations are against those federal agents, whether it's ICE, the FBI, Homeland Security, anyone federal agents assisting. LAPD, CHP, and the Sheriff's Department are all distancing themselves from the immigration operations that have been happening. But here's the interesting part and what makes it difficult. When there's violence against those federal officers, when there's graffiti on the street, cars on fire in the street, now it's in the hands of LAPD. Now it's in the hands of the Sheriff's Department. They can't sit idly by and let this happen.
Sure seems like they are.
This is no longer setting a car on fire in the middle of the street about preventing an ICE raid from happening at a Home Depot in the Fashion District.
He's right.
So that's the awkward juxtaposition where I think the mayor is kind of playing both sides, but is also being responsive to the fact that while people are upset and they're emotional about what's happening with the federal government, with immigration from the Trump administration and the feds going to businesses and homes in Los Angeles, the LAPD, the Sheriff's Department, the CHP, all the local agencies are towing that fine line where they're saying, we're obviously not part of immigration and anything going on there, but we got to keep the peace on the streets in Los Angeles. And so it's tough because their presence alone is sometimes agitating the crowd. The police presence, the flashbangs, the tear gas, those are provoking the crowd to fire back. But it's tough because police are not part of immigration, but now they're part of these protests.
Someone's
and these
setting another fire.
It's a nuanced issue that is playing out in the streets here in Los Angeles, and I think it's important to note folks are trying to be cognizant of the fact and the emotion that the people out here have, but also realizing setting cars on fire, throwing rocks at police officers, assaulting people on the street is not okay, regardless of what your cause is.
It's a difficult job being mayor. You have a lot of constituencies to tend to. And as she did also say, the mayor said she's for everyone. She wants everyone to.
Is that who I think it is?
One side or the other side or the other side. She wants everyone to be okay. She doesn't want to see violence, and she wants to see her citizens maintain their safety and comfort living in Los Angeles.
Oh
it looks like from Air 7, Tim, I'm not sure you can even see, but it looks like at least 3 of those Waymos, 3 of the 5 have now been lit on fire. Do you see any police moving anywhere in this area?
No, I mean, from our vantage point, like I said, we're a little bit removed, right? We're not trying to get too close to that thick black smoke, but I don't see any police officers on this side of the 101. Of course, we're dipped down a little bit on the road here as it curves down into Alameda. I see a lot of bicycles and folks on the street and a lot of onlookers on this side, essentially watching it from this angle. I mean, look at this. There's a city bus driving by. I don't think there's any police anywhere close to this. Whether or not the fire department is coming and how quickly they're coming remains to be seen. They might let this burn out, but obviously in the middle of the street here, a raging fire, cars that were set on fire.
It's not the Channel 5 guy? I thought it was because of the mask.
To see, obviously, all
I really thought it was.
Yeah, indeed.
Tim, this is Niku. So you're out there and you're just like in the thick of it. The smoke is behind you.
Maybe it is, maybe it's not. I guess we'll find out in a couple of days, right?
We'll find out. In the air, does it have a distinct smell? What's it like?
You know, it's an interesting question, too, because on Friday night, especially when those tear gas was shot from the feds outside the federal building, that is a very distinct smell. You get it up your nose, it burns all the way through your nostrils and gets into your eyes as well. Some of those pepper spray balls that we felt in Compton as well, those are kind of quick bangs. You kind of get a little bit and then you move on your way. This smells like an open dumpster fire. I mean, for better or worse. We could smell it when we pulled up and walked up the street. The thick black smoke is kind of emanating. Thankfully, there's not much of a wind at this point, so it's going straight up in the air, but I think it's a true sense of what we're feeling here is that smoke is kind of emblematic of the frustration, this thick black smoke kind of billowing above these demonstrations. Everyone frustrated at this point and just a cloud of uncertainty hovering over all of Los Angeles these last 3 days.
Yeah, I don't know how much you can tell. You're in one spot, kind of separated from everything. I'm just curious at this point whether things are truly escalating in downtown Los Angeles or just a group that splintered off happened to find 5 cars that they were able to light on fire.
I think it's a bit of both.
Like it's a lot worse than the situation actually playing out on the ground.
It's probably a great point, Jory, because that's the quintessential question when you have rallies, demonstrations, riots, if you will. I wouldn't go far as to call it that. I know President Trump had tweeted about riots and looting. I don't know that I would characterize it that way. But certainly when you have groups like this, from what we've seen, Tommy, pan over here to the left here.
There's no
the vast majority are people taking videos, people waving flags, people walking around, people wanting to be part of the cause, wanting to have their voices heard, and wanting to show the power of numbers and the power
how did
of
this?
force.
Wait,
Certainly
did a police officer set
here,
this car on fire
it was 2 dozen,
too?
maybe 30 agitators throwing rocks,
Oh,
covered
no.
head to toe, trying to
How could the
instigate
LAPD
police
do
officers
this?
and the feds who were there. The vast majority, that's another big explosion, huh? The vast majority of the folks here seem to be those who are walking around, and you have these pockets of people who are intentionally causing some issues. I'm pausing here for a second just to take a see if police are moving up any closer. Obviously, the biggest concern anytime you have a car fire, but especially when you have a car fire surrounded by people standing around, as you have a gas tank full of gasoline, and a fire and explosion here would not be ideal. Some of those explosions, you know, it's interesting, we've gotten used to over the last day and a half to tell the difference between a fireworks like that or flashbang being fired by authorities.
Oh my God,
a
look at
subtle
all
difference,
this.
and frankly doesn't really make a difference. Obviously one is sent by authorities and the other is fired by, that's another one that's a firework. But these are part of the crowd, intermittent, and a small part of the crowd. So it's tough to describe the crowd as a whole as agitators. I wouldn't even say that, even close to that.
Of course
but
not all of
because
them are
it only takes
agitators.
a handful of people to light a car on fire, a handful of people to throw fireworks into a line of police officers, a handful of people to vandalize vehicles, to vandalize and graffiti walls, those get the attention, and rightfully so. I mean, obviously you have a huge burning fire in the middle of the street
Obviously,
here.
that's the problem.
But it doesn't seem like this is necessarily encompassing
would
the vast
people
majority of the
peacefully
people
protesting
here.
get the
It's just
attention?
everyone gets caught up in the hoopla as they wanted to come out and kind of voice their, have their voices heard.
No doubt. It's a matter of a couple people kind of ruining things for everybody else. What might have been a peaceful demonstration certainly is no longer that. As those cars continue to burn and explode. We've talked about those are Waymos, so they are fully electric. And once the air and the fire reaches those batteries, it will go off like that. It's a very difficult put out. Tim, you okay? You okay? Okay, we'll get back to Tim in just a moment. But again, it looks like at least three. I'm sure those guys are working on trying to set the other two on fire as well. And you can see that material just melting and burning and covering the surface and still continuing to burn on the surface of the street.
And we just heard that Tim Caputo was moving, so we'll have a different look, different angle from the protest downtown. But where Tim was standing and we heard those explosions in the background, I think he said it was a combination of the car fire, fireworks, and something else. But
right. Well, we did see those flashbangs going off, so it looks like officers are somewhere, unless that is those are just simple fireworks. But we see those poofs of smoke, and those typically are flashbangs trying to disrupt the crowd. And we do see some movement coming now towards the 101 from the top of our screen. So that would be north to south. That would be coming directly from where Tim was standing. I don't know if there's any police activity pushing these folks this way, or perhaps just the smoke. It's getting too hard to breathe. More explosions here from those cars, but we do have a decent-sized crowd watching these cars continue to burn. Otherwise, as Tim said, things do look relatively peaceful at this hour. We saw the folks at Aliso and Alameda sitting down on the ground. We saw the folks at Temple and Alameda just kind of waiting it out. It's broken down to just a couple dozen people at that location. And so things seem pretty, it's hard to say that with three cars burning, but things do seem relatively calm, minus these cars that have been set on fire.
Yeah, minus the car fires, things are fine.
It looks like this scene is
By the way,
worst
those Waymo cars are public transport.
Like you said, the other
You're literally watching your tax dollars go up in smoke.
Sitting down, and this is just the worst of it. Seeing these three Waymo cars on fire, which hopefully someone can get a handle on them very soon. But again, it's really dangerous for any kind of police or the fire department to even move in on a situation like this.
It's a private company?
Really
it
handle
is.
This gently.
Who's paying the private company?
It's difficult. It's hard, especially with three. Are there three on fire?
Christ,
It looks like three are on fire.
So far.
But there are 5 Waymos in that area. But
they've still got 2 left.
It's a precarious situation. You want to maintain control and get order back in the city, but if you try and do so too in a certain way, you're going to devolve here into some really bad confrontations.
Yeah, we wouldn't want that.
You know,
it's much better
there
to
are
let
discussions
things start
being
on
had
fire.
right now by law enforcement about how best to handle this situation. Once the demonstrators made their way onto the 101, it took CHP a little bit of time to come up with a plan and how they were able to do that. And here we have the 101 back open again. So same kind of situation here. There's a large group of people. It could turn very volatile if you move law enforcement in there in the wrong way.
I don't know why Trump would do this at all.
What is just a bunch of people having fun watching cars burn into a massive confrontation and altercation between officers and demonstrators.
So it looks like next to that big, the car fire, we have that wide angle. Is that the one on the other side? Is that a closer look at the car fire?
Yes.
And if so, there's people around there taking pictures, and it's just, they don't even mind all the toxic fumes in the air. But the scene has definitely looked like it's less crowded than what it looked like about 30 minutes ago. So at least people are moving away, but still really dangerous, because again, these EV batteries, this can explode at any minute, and just the air. I mean, Tim said it smelled like a dumpster fire behind him. Yeah. So.
And poor Tommy, his photographer, was back at this location last night with Amy Powell dealing with that. They were hit with tear gas, and so he's back at it again. There's another explosion coming out of that car. We thank all of our photojournalists for being there, and our reporters on the ground. This is not easy stuff. It's a very precarious, dangerous situation. We saw one station in town. Their reporter and photographer were basically kicked off of scene by demonstrators. It was unsafe for them to be there. They pushed them out of there. That is why we're being very selective with where we put our reporters on the ground today, because we don't want to put them into harm's way. But simply being on the ground, you can see how volatile it is. Tim was just a short ways away from this and had to move their situation because the crowd might have been moving their way. And you, as a reporter, with a camera there, you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you can't get out and put yourself in harm's way.
And it could be so tempting, because you really want to show, you want to get the message across and really show these images, these videos of just what it looks like there, but at the same time, you really have to worry about yourself, your well-being, and that's also the case for the police officers that are out there too. I'm sure they're caught in that that kind of struggle as well.
Why would they be in harm's way if it was a peaceful
found
protest?
A new location. Let's see where he is and what is going on. Obviously. As we search really for the bulk of this crowd. That's the 101 South that is still shut down. The 101 North is moving freely again, and what a shot from Tim Caputo's camera location. Tim, tell us about what you're seeing now.
Well, full disclosure, we didn't actually move locations. We were kind of double parked and had to move the van to let some people out, because once we got to this location, what's ended up happening, and no surprise here, Los Angeles Street, cars cannot go down. So they're pulling this kind of U-turn to go back down to Alameda Street here towards Union Station. So we are in the same spot, a pretty safe distance away. I can tell you, there are rowdy elements of this crowd. That's why I'm kind of keeping my head on a swivel as well, because some of the anger pointed at the media, some of the anger obviously pointed at law enforcement, at the mayor's office, whomever they perceive as potentially a person of authority at this point. So we're just kind of watching our backs as well as we watch what's going on ourselves. But as you guys have mentioned too, is this car trying to make a U-turn here, this Range Rover red one in the middle of the street. That's a really good question. These cars are still burning, and the vast majority of people standing on the sidewalk here and standing even in the street here, mostly just getting video. It does seem like some of the attention has moved away from the burning vehicles as this crowd is now moving back towards the federal building, across the 101, back over to Los Angeles, Aliso, and even Alameda Street, essentially where the protests we've seen the last 48, 72 hours have been focused. Obviously, this is where it began, but it eventually kind of bleeds out and filters out into the adjoining and adjacent streets around here. And that's what happened in this area when these cars were set on fire. It does seem, at least where we're standing right now, while it does seem from our angle there are a handful of people standing on the street, the crowd is actually moving farther away across the 101, potentially back towards that federal building. It's tough to tell from here, and frankly, I'm not going to try to get any closer to show you a closer perspective from it, but it does seem like, just from the visuals here, as the fireworks continue to go off, the crowd is starting to move away from these burning vehicles. Hopefully, maybe that gives the fire department the opportunity to get in here and try to douse these flames before any gas tank explodes or anything gets worse here. It remains to be seen, because we haven't seen a whole lot of law enforcement or first responders in this immediate vicinity. And understandably so, obviously, with folks so angry and things on fire and fireworks going off, it is not exactly the safest place to be at the moment.
Why are people lighting off fireworks?
You said you are keeping your head on the swivel.
What is this, the 4th of fucking July?
We saw someone pull up right behind you who was on a bike. But what is the general feeling of the crowd there? Are they confrontational? Are they saying anything to you?
No point putting the fires
They're
out.
angry.
Those batteries
They're
can
not
burn
necessarily
underwater.
angry at me. They're not necessarily angry at the media. They're angry. They're angry at what's been going on the last couple of days. They're angry at this immigration policy that they protested back in February. Remember back on February 2nd when protesters at the time got onto the 101. That was the kind of initial set-off point for a lot of these folks. And now that what we've seen over the last 24 hours, I feel like to a degree it's emboldened them. You have the crowd, you have numbers, you have people that are upset, that are frustrated, that are scared, and they want to have their voices heard.
He's right about
and they
that.
feel as though the only way they could do it is be as loud and be as disruptive as possible, and they are doing exactly that. I can tell you the vast majority of people here just want to be part of the movement. They want to be part of the resistance. That doesn't necessarily mean they want to be part of assaulting officers, of vandalism, of burning cars,
Yeah,
or
but
of
they
anything
enable
like
the
that.
people that do.
But being part of it oftentimes means you get awfully close to it. And I think that's what's happening with some folks here, that you might not want to be part of that car fire. But guess what? When you drive by on your motorcycle and do some burnouts around it,
this
you're
isn't
part
a
of the action
resistance.
as well.
This
And
is a
that's what's happening
democratic
right now.
election
This
that
is,
you lost.
kind of a show of force, a show of resistance, and it's still going strong.
Yeah, and as the mayor alluded to, and as we know, there are legitimate demonstrators out there. There are also people who are after a sporting event, just want to watch something burn. And so there is a distinction between what is happening right now, whether these cars burning are truly, along with the it's not a peaceful demonstration, but whether they're actually out there to make their voices heard, or whether they're just out there to take pictures of themselves in front of a burning car once the crowd is out of the streets.
And Jory, it's an interesting point too, because you mentioned the mayor talking about how she wants it to be peaceful and she doesn't want things to go sideways or anyone to get hurt. I think it's an interesting point because a lot of folks out here have told me this is sad. This is not sad because of what the people are doing. They said it's sad it's come to this. They've reached the boiling point.
It's sad that I have to set the car on fire.
They want to do something about it. And I think that's what the mayor kind of alluded to
why
as well.
Why are you making me set the car on fire?
Angelenos for this. She's blaming what led up to make Angelenos do this. And I think that's a subtle but important difference of the folks out here as well, and what the mayor was trying to convey, in the sense that the Trump administration's immigration policies, the ICE raids that have been happening in the last couple of days here in Los Angeles, brought this city to its breaking point. And that's why Angelenos are doing exactly this. And I think that's the sentiment by and large. I've only talked to a handful of people kind of on the outskirts here who said, this is sad. I hate to see it come to this in the city, but something needs to be done. And this is how they're lashing out.
Poor victims.
Right, we've seen
this is how they're lashing out.
Those ICE raids
Something has to be done. I know what to do.
Bass alluded to the
Let's
fact
burn
that
down a car.
one of them took place at a Home Depot.
Transit.
We saw some in the garment district, and some
destroy
factory
the public.
workers were taken into custody.
Let's waste tax dollars.
It is said by the Trump administration that their focus is on the dangerous, the violent, those who have criminal records, who are in this country illegally. But a lot of people in this crowd feel like that is not the focus of what is actually happening. And while some dangerous and violent people are being taken off the streets, there are also upstanding members of society that are being swept up in this as well. And that was not supposed to be what this what has happened. In fact, I heard an affiliate in our nation's capital this weekend who was a Trump voter, who is a U.S. citizen, who was swept up by ICE simply because he looked like he might be here illegally. And once they saw his ID, that it was a real ID and he was a citizen, they let him go quickly. But that is what is happening here under some of these
So
ICE
you're saying
missions.
that people aren't just getting randomly picked up and deported
insane.
for no
and
reason?
I think Tim really said it best.
I feel like that pretty much says it, right? Wow, so they thought that a guy was an illegal alien. They checked his ID and he wasn't, and they let him go? Wow.
City, it's city. I forgot what
that's
that
crazy.
Was, but we saw it's just graffitied all over the city. We were seeing graffiti and not nice things either. So
not
a lot
nice
of cleanup
things
in downtown LA.
And Governor Gavin Newsom, who is now at odds with President Trump and the federal government over the federalization of California National Guardsmen and women, keeping active on social media, responding to actor James Woods, who posted a video of 2 police cars on fire with the quote, "If I hear one more leftist shill in mainstream media utter the words peaceful protest, I'll throw up."
True.
To which the governor responded, this video is from 2020. And so there he is active, going back and trying to prove his point that the president was wrong to bring in the National Guard against his wishes.
Great argument.
Which is something that typically we do not see happen. The normal order of things is
really?
that
so this isn't his first time fucking up.
Would request the federalization, some help from the federal government, and bring in the National Guard. That did not happen here. President Trump took it upon himself to federalize 2,000 members of the National Guard last night, put them into use today. The governor has made a move now to retake control of those National Guards members. And again, we talked about the history in our country of something like this happening. Presidents have federalized National Guards members. The last time I think it's happened was the Civil Rights era, when John F. Kennedy federalized National Guards members in the South to allow black students to attend schools who were being met with resistance by the governor, George Wallace being chief among them, and other local governments that weren't allowing federal law to be executed, and it was directly harming citizens.
That's right.
This situation is not that.
Right. It's so different, and it's so hard to see. Like, okay,
so
usually
this isn't ignoring federal law and harming citizens?
Let's see what happened. We can't really do that with this because this is, again, it's not going in the right order. 2,000 National Guard troops are deployed
I guess
here,
I was
and,
confused.
President Donald Trump went over Governor Newsom's authority, and he brought them here. So it's just really difficult to see how this is going to turn out.
Yeah,
we can't predict it.
And we've heard from ICE about their the execution of some of their activity the last couple of days, and some of the violent and dangerous criminals and people that they have taken into custody who now face deportment. Our Tim Caputo, who you've been talking with there on the ground there, spoke with U.S. Attorney Bill Asaley this weekend about some of those movements. Let's hear more. Tim, what did the U.S. Attorney tell you?
We didn't fight the Civil War for fucking
nothing. He was resolute
nothing.
that these ICE operations will continue regardless of this, regardless of what happened yesterday, regardless of what happened on Friday as well. It was an interesting take because we've heard a lot of people talking about how they want us to stop. The U.S. Attorney said absolutely not. This is their job and their duty. They say they were going after criminals. They say they were going after people who have immigration judges in their final warning to leave the country. He also said, full disclosure, if we run across somebody who is here illegally, we're going to arrest them too. Now, how much of that is going after people with those warrants and how much is the other, we don't exactly know, but he said regardless of what is going on, those operations that happened in Paramount yesterday, he said they carried them out. Despite that entire protest happening for the better part of 12, 15 hours. And he said they will continue to happen here in Los Angeles. He was undeterred by everything that's going on. In addition to the National Guard, he says they've mobilized Border Patrol to protect the federal buildings here downtown. An obvious mobilization of federal officers and federal agents to protect the work that they are doing and protect the people who are doing that work. I had asked him what he thought about this resistance, about people being frustrated, about people being sad, that's all that's going on. And he essentially said, it is what it is. We're enforcing the law. And he said even more emphatically that if you try to resist those officers, if you try to impede those officers,
ready to deploy
if you
Los
try to
Angeles.
assault or actually assault those federal agents, you will get arrested and you will be prosecuted. And we saw that yesterday. We saw it to a smaller degree on Friday. And I could imagine that's what we're going to see here as well as these protests have continued all day today. It was an interesting perspective from the U.S. Attorney as well, because obviously he sees it from the other side, is that they are federal agents carrying out these immigration this immigration work and the protection of those officers and those agents who are not only carrying out the work like yesterday in Paramount, who were mobilizing.
Wait, did Donald Trump set that car on fire too?
Where they were all meeting to start doing that work, and he said
why does he keep setting these cars on fire?
And they won't stand for that. So it's an interesting point of view that we maybe not necessarily have heard as much over the course of the weekend because of the presence of so many people who are frustrated and fed up with these ICE raids. He said, I wouldn't even call them raids. They are arresting people who have warrants out for their arrest. He didn't even like the description of calling it an ICE raid. I think the vast majority of this crowd would disagree with that.
Right, and that's why we keep hearing from people like Governor Newsom and the mayor, for people begging them to be...
real quick, we got another one right here.
Even if you don't plan to invoke the Insurrection Act, do you plan to send troops to Los Angeles?
What?
Even if you're not planning to invoke the Insurrection Act, do you still plan to send troops?
Well, we're going to have troops everywhere. We're not going to let this happen to our country. We're not going to let our country be torn apart like it was under Biden and his photo pen.
What's the bar for sending Marines?
The bar is what I think it is. I mean, if we see danger to our country and to our citizens, we'll be very, very strong in terms of law and order. It's about law and order.
Sending African Marines on the table, sir. Secretary has
We're going to see what we need. We'll send whatever we need to make sure there's law and order.
Thank God.
Do you see those protests spreading to other cities, Chicago, New York, for example, in the next few days?
Yes, we're going to be watching it very closely. And when they spit at people, you know, they spit. That's their new thing. They spit and worse.
Oh.
You know what they throw at them, right? And when that happens, I have a little statement. They say, they spit, we hit. And I told them, nobody's going to spit on our police officers. Nobody's going to spit on our military, which they do as a common thing. They get up to them this far away and then they start spitting in their face. That happens, they get hit very hard.
What are the rules of engagement for federal troops?
We'll see what happens. If we think there's a serious insurrection or less than that, we're going to have law and order. Very important.
How would you define an insurrection?
You have to really just have to look at the site. You have to see what's happening. Last night in Los Angeles, we watched it very closely. There was a lot of violence there. There was a lot of violence that it could have gotten much worse. You have an incompetent governor. Just take a look at the train stations that he's building. Like 20 times over budget. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. So I did call him the other night. I said, look, you got to take care of this. Otherwise, I'm sending in the troops. That's what we did. Thank you very much. Do you have a question for Marco? Question for Marco?
California officials could face federal charges if they stand in the way of the deportation. Something that Homeland Management said.
If officials stand in the way of law and order, yeah, they will face charges. Thank you very much.
Thank fucking God.